facilitator for Adolescent Health Initiative. I'd ask you on the screen, we have the red flags for dating violence quick screen. If you'll take a few minutes to review that. Our speaker, AHI Nelson, is just minutes away. We appreciate your patience. It was craziness in the big city today with multiple accidents on the interstate, and it has caused some chaos. So thank you for hanging in there. I'll just say a few things about the Adolescent Health Initiative. It is designed to provide training to healthcare workers across a variety of disciplines to better prepare you to provide evidence-based services to adolescents. It is our goal at Envision to bring you up-to-date information and resources related to the care of teenagers. As you might know, this is a certificate program, and we'd really like to encourage you to sign up for this certificate. In order to receive it, you must attend 10 of these weekly sessions, and a minimum of 6 of them should be attended live. The rest we host on the Moodle platform. Contact us if you'd like to know how to access them. Everything is recorded, so if you'd like to go back and view any presentation we've done before, you are welcome to do that. Just contact Zach or Kevin, let us know. There is a pre and post participant survey, and we ask for 1 patient presentation case consultation. And I just want to say they're actually very fun, low stress, and a way to get some information about how you might approach taking care of an adolescent with an issue, health or medical or behavioral health. So just reach out to us. It's a really great program, and we're very proud of our certificate program. So you too can be an expert in adolescent health. And in just a few minutes, we expect to see Anna walk through the door, and we thank you for waiting for our presentation to start.
All right, thanks, Carol. Hi, this is Kevin Werling here at Envision New Mexico, Systems Analyst and your support person. Zach is also here supporting the call today. So we figured we'd go ahead and go through our basic slides and just to let you know what's required for CME. So we did want to let you know that, yes, we are recording the session, so please don't include any confidential patient health information during any discussion or questions. And there's a couple of icons there for muting and unmuting your video and audio. We'll go over that in a sec. If you do wish to receive an attendance certificate, which would include your CME or CEU information, please make sure that you announce your name. You can do that through chat if you'd like. We'd love to hear your voice, and we'd also like to see your face if possible. I know it's early, but we're all here too. So, and if you're called on or something, you're definitely welcome to say pass if you don't want to answer. And we do send out our certificates once a month. It's usually about the second week of the month following the session that you're in right now. And feel free to email me about any questions about that. So our computer video and audio. So in Zoom, you have a couple of icons. They're typically down in the bottom left, although the nice thing about Zoom is you can customize it. So you can move it around, and it remembers where you moved it. So it might be up at the top, so just so you know. So please unmute and let us know that you're out there here in just a couple of slides. We'd like to hear your voice. And also, if you can get on camera, we'd appreciate that as well. Our disclosure and accreditation statements are on screen right now, and those are required for CME. We do offer, we have case consultations here with AHI New Mexico, and it's a part of our certificate also that we offer every semester. So you only have to do one. You don't have to do any if you just want to attend one session or off and on. But we'd love to have you come on and have one of our case consultations with our panel of experts. And you can be reimbursed by Molina and Blue Cross Blue Shield. Now we're looking for those reimbursement numbers at this point, but last we heard it was up to $150 from Molina. It was about $75 from Blue Cross. So it is well worth your time and effort. There's a form involved, so just get in touch with Zach or myself or Carol, and we'll get you that form. And now is our opportunity for roll call. So if you're able to be on audio, we'd like to hear your voice. So let us know that you're out there and just where you're from. And if you're not able to speak or you don't have audio capabilities, go ahead and use the chat box. I will send a chat here to everybody just to kind of awaken that. And without further ado, we do have our speaker here, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Carol Conley, our facilitator.
Well, thank you all for waiting. We do have a few people in the room. If you all would introduce yourselves real quick, and then I'll introduce our speaker, Anna Nelson.
Jane Beckley with Envision New Mexico.
My name is Maya Trujillo. I'm with Envision New Mexico.
Hi everyone, I'm Emma. I'm a social work intern here at Envision New Mexico.
I'm Zach Johnson with Envision.
And I am Carol Conley, your facilitator, and I am so happy to introduce Anna Nelson. Anna Nelson is an LISW and an adjunct professor at New Mexico State University School of Social Work. Ms. Nelson received her master's degree in social work in 2003 with honors from New Mexico Highlands University. In 2010, Ms. Nelson became a Robert Wood Johnson Ladder to Leadership Fellow. She has dedicated her career to serving youth and their families, communities with experience in both direct practice and policy development. Her professional emphasis are youth and community engagement, violence prevention, gender responsive and culturally relevant service systems development, and policy transformation. Ms. Nelson has served on the board of directors for Pegasus Legal Services for Children and currently is an executive board member of Save Team New Mexico and a national advisory board member of Love is Not Abuse. Ms. Nelson was the first to create New Mexico's gender responsive behavioral health plan in 2006 and has championed New Mexico's teen dating violence strategic prevention initiative, guided by positive youth development since 2007. For her work in successfully reducing the rate of teen dating violence in New Mexico, Ms. Nelson was the recipient of the 2011 Patty Jennings and Polly Arango Citizen Advocacy Award. And we so appreciate you taking the time to come and share all this information with us and for our participants out in Zoom
Carol,
land.
thank you so much. I'm really, really honored to be here. And every time I hear that bio, I'm like, man, I got to shorten that up thank you for the person introducing me. But I just want to thank everyone for their patience as well this morning. There was an accident during my commute and it just got me gridlocked. So my apologies. And, you know, I am both honored and also extremely excited to bring awareness to dating violence. It is an area I feel really passionately about. I always start my dialogue about dating violence sharing a little bit of a story of my experience clinically. So I've been in the field of social work for about 26 years. And many of those years I've had the honor of partnering with Envision New Mexico, which has been wonderful. I'm currently a full-time assistant professor at New Mexico State University. So now I teach full-time, which is a really fun thing. And when I was in my actually doing direct practice for about 15 years, I did clinical practice with a specialization in serving young people, especially those young people who were child protective service or juvenile justice involved. And prior to that, I had worked for years in adult domestic violence prevention and addressing adult domestic violence. And so I felt, you know, I'll just really be real. I felt very confident in my knowledge about adult domestic violence, and I thought I could spot it anywhere. I thought I could spot the dynamics. And, you know, the experience I'm about to share was incredibly humbling because it helped me to realize how little I actually knew about dynamics of particularly dating violence among adolescents. So about 10 years ago, while I was still doing clinical work, I had a young woman who I was serving who was just struggling in so many different areas. Her family was really having a hard time. She was running away, showing a lot of huge behaviors. And I tried everything to reach out and connect with this young woman. I tried, you know, I always talk about I tried car therapy where we listened to balloons and got to drive around and stuff, and a lot of different strategies, and was not able to reach her. And I was able to transfer her at that time to a lower level of care, but just about a week after I did that, I got the call that changed, my life personally, certainly the family's life, and then changed my sort of vision about what I wanted to do as a career. And that was to hear that this young woman had been murdered. So this young woman was 12 years old, and the person who she was dating at the time was 19. And it turns out, originally they believed he was the perpetrator of the homicide, but in actuality it was another individual. But this young woman was going through so much violence between her and her 19-year-old boyfriend that she was unable to talk with us, talk with me, talk with our family, constantly living in fear, and unfortunately really had a very, very sad outcome. So I share about that just to say that was beyond humbling and such a powerful experience. And that's what brings me to talk with you all today. And so I noticed that there's a chat box up there. I really want to encourage folks to be interactive with the chat box, and I'm going to rely on perhaps folks down at the other end of the table who with better eyes than me to let me know if a chat comes up. And I think we're a little short on time. How much time do we have?
Well, we go till 9.
Okay.
And we'll just see how it goes. I mean, we have to adjust when circumstances ask us to. So, I want you to just feel comfortable and do what you need to for your presentation.
Well, wonderful. So I have a few hopes for this dialogue today for you all. One of my hopes is that you're able to spot dating violence a little bit more readily. We'll talk about the correlations between dating violence and other significant adolescent health risks. So these are, we're not saying that dating violence is causal, but we see direct correlation between dating violence and significant health issues and behavioral health issues young people deal with. And then there is something called the red flag screen that I'm hoping you all received a copy of. That red flag screen was developed based on an extensive literature review. I want to say we finalized that in 2010. That screen originally, we did this work in partnership with young people, and we had a lot of youth feedback and a lot of youth advisory on the questions. And it's intended to be a conversation starter. It's not meant to be, our hope was that it would be a quick screen that a school-based health center provider would be able to utilize. It takes a little bit longer than what we would consider normally a quick screen, but it is absolutely useful, especially if you're having difficulty in broaching the topic with a young person. It's a non-threatening conversation starter, and it also helps you, it's a mnemonic, so it helps you to remember what to watch out for. So my hope is that in some way that is useful to you, you can integrate that into your practice. So the basics about dating violence. Essentially, this slide just helps us to understand that there are a few different ways to approach defining dating violence. Clearly, we look at the social definition, which is much more about the power and control that one person has over a young person under 18 or younger, okay? I also wanted to make clear that dating violence, we consider adolescents 10 to 24. We look at dating violence more about like age 12 to 19. And we look at that window of time in defining that age because young people are marginalized from a lot of traditional support systems that adult survivors can access. So this helps us to understand there are unique barriers for young people to face. And dating violence, the criteria for both the social and the legal definition is just one partner is under the age of 18, essentially. The legal definition for us, it's under the age of 19. So the legal definition really clearly states what type of violence can occur. This is from the statutory authority here in New Mexico. So in different states, there are different definitions. Important to note that there is legal remedy for young people under 18. They just have to have a parent or a next adult, someone who is over the age of 18, accompany them to court, and they can receive an order of protection. Important to note about that, though, that really, especially in our smaller communities, can be incredibly difficult both to access and then also implement. So as clinicians out in the field, just really being thoughtful about the utilization of orders for protection. How do you meet their school needs, their health needs, and access to supports when this violence is occurring. So just a little bit about the social and legal definitions. And again, feel free always to use this as a reference for you all. At the end, I provide my contact information. So in the event you have questions, you can always contact me via email, or I always recommend that people text me, because my cell phone is weirdly like another part of my body at this point. So it's like always next to me. So that's how you can get a hold of me.
Excuse me.
Thank you. Okay, and so this probably looks so familiar to so many people, this power and control wheel, and it's kind of a cornerstone of anti-violence movement, especially around adult domestic violence. I mainly leave this for you so that you have something that is teen specific. So one of the things we learn from young people in doing this work is they want resources that resonate for their age range. They want developmentally and sort of culturally engaged resources that really resonate for them. So the teen power and control wheel, one piece that I want to really specify is a big piece that I see is something called technology abuse, and then something called birth control sabotage. Again, for our school-based health centers, this is a vital piece to understand. Because if you're noticing that a young person has reached out for reproductive health support, they seem very engaged, then somehow they're missing appointments, or clearly if that young person presents as pregnant, you might want to make sure that they're safe in their relationship and that everything is okay. So with regard to technology abuse, it's just the frequent and controlling texting, messaging, Instagramming, Snapchatting, and if that individual doesn't respond, then there's a threat of a negative consequence for them. So if the person being victimized doesn't respond, so you can imagine that plays havoc in the school environment, right? And at home too, you have parents like myself who, I ask my son to put everything down and chill with me for a minute, and if he were in a situation like this, he might not feel safe or comfortable enough to put his phone down. So technology abuse is pretty literally the use of technology to control. And then birth control sabotage. So for a while, I had a small private practice serving pro bono, serving young women who self-reported as teen dating violence victims. And we had a phenomenal success rate of those young women being able to get free from their relationships. But unfortunately, we had quite a lot of them who had their first child before the age of 16. And so what they would report are, the literal forms of birth control sabotage, like throwing away contraceptives, refusing to use condoms, but also more subtle ways like sabotaging the condoms. And then it's a full continuum, right? So this also includes sexual assault. So a lot of those young women also reported instances of dating-related sexual assault. I think one of the hard things about this is the emotional component, which I heard, again, these young women speaking on their partners forcing them to be intimate because they would threaten to leave them or be with other girls, or other things that would make them feel really scared that they might lose that individual. So a lot of emotional abuse attached to birth control sabotage. So I don't think I talk about this in this presentation, but again, and I apologize again for not necessarily knowing who are out there and spending time with us this morning. But if you are a provider working with young people around reproductive health, one of the best ways you can support them is to role play reproductive health scenarios that they may find themselves in, so that they're able to create their own language and how to stand strong against pressure or, clearly safety mechanisms that they can reach out to in the event they're threatened with violence. But also just that confidence that young people need to say, look, I don't feel comfortable doing this with you. So no, we're not going to do that. Okay, so I just talked a little bit about this. Let me see if I missed anything. Again, clear for all of us who work with young people need a lot of sleep, right? Like they need to be able to sleep a continuous, 9 to 10 hours to really, go through adolescence in a healthy way. And so one point I didn't make about tech abuse is this happens all day and all night, this form of control. And so, there's definitely reports that young people share that they get text all night, every night, and are required to respond, which means they're not getting adequate sleep. This does also impact juvenile justice involvement. So say a young person's meeting with their probation officer, or they're in court, for example, and their abuser is, or the person, I want to clarify that. I want to say the person perpetrating the violence. And I'll explain why I say that in a second. But that person is, causing them to be distracted. Distracted driving is also a clear problem with tech abuse. So let me just pause and say real quick why it's really important for us to change the way we refer to this form of very serious violence. So it is definitely, teen dating violence is definitely significant. So it impacts about 1 in 9 of our young people statewide, but we've had a significant reduction since the Dating Violence Strategic Initiative started in 2010. But unique about dating violence, different from adult domestic violence, is young men and young women report the same prevalence of violence and have consistently for over a decade. The same prevalence of physical violence, not the same prevalence of sexual violence. So clearly our young women are disproportionately impacted by that, but young men and young women are reporting the same prevalence. And so I have a lot of theories about why, as young people age into adulthood, that gender differential changes, where disproportionately women are victimized by intimate partner violence. One of the theories that I have is that young women are more isolated as they age into adulthood than young men are, which creates some challenges. And then also a big economic component. So in teen dating violence, if these young people are not co-parenting, they're not reliant on one another typically for economic pieces. And so the economic control that you find in adult domestic violence is maybe not as prevalent in dating violence. So there's some weird, interesting phenomena happening there. But I did want to make that point. And the reason I say people perpetrating the violence is because first, they may not be the primary aggressor. And secondly, what we find in early interest, so this is why this work just, makes me so incredibly hopeful, is when we are able to intervene early, we find that after a period of 1 year, these behaviors have abated, meaning the young people are not carrying the trauma response or the perpetration into adulthood, and that is powerful. So it speaks to adolescent resilience, and I think in a profound way. And if I ever get another opportunity to share more on that, I will, because that I think is what is so incredibly hopeful. And what for me is I think about you all across the state doing your work, what is so important in your all's role, because as early interveners, you make a significant difference in the trajectory of these young people into adulthood. So that's powerful. I want to just pause. I've been saying lots of words really fast. I just want to make sure there aren't any questions, any thoughts.
Well, we've been tracking them, Anna, just so you know, and mostly they're about how do they access all your documents, but they're on our website. So
Okay.
If you want to pull down her PowerPoint and have it to keep, if you want the red flag screen, all of that is on our website, and you can download it straight to your desktop.
Absolutely. And this is like literally one tiny little component of the resources I have. So I have a lot of school-based, school-linked activities, you know, and a lot of resources. So again, please make sure that you keep my email and my cell phone to text me. And if I get a good email address from you, I'm happy to send other resources you may be curious about. So I really try to stay on top of what's happening out there. So moving forward, this is just, again, to underscore the correlations between dating violence and other adolescent health risks. So this data is very dated, and I'll explain why. Department of Health epidemiology, it's really hard to get data from them anymore. And so we used to have a great, you know, Dan Green, data guru, awesome epi guy, right? So he's been tasked with other really important things to do. But for a period of years, he provided me with the our New Mexico YRRS data by teen dating violence. And so consistently and statistically significantly, we notice that young people who report being victims of dating violence are more likely to carry a weapon at twice the rate of their peers. What is that? 5 times the rate or 4 times the rate of skipping school because of feeling unsafe. Now that's significant to me. Being in a physical fight on school property, again, double the rate. Bullied on school property. Cigarette use by almost 3 times the rate. Alcohol use by 3 times the rate. Marijuana use. Persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness, and then seriously considered a plan, and then finally look at the rate of attempted suicide within the past year. So that one always gives me pause to really, wow, you know. So this is connected with teen dating violence is connected with early and unplanned pregnancy at 4 to 6 times the rate, and then something called rapid repeat pregnancy, which means not only is this young person just newly having a child, but within 12 to 24 months having a second child, which is very, you know, when we think through socioeconomic impact of that, academic success impact of that, it's profound. This is also related to clearly psychological trauma. So when I say that there is a disproportionality, that there is a similar rate of reporting physical dating violence among young men and young women, we do notice that young women report long-standing trauma symptomology more often, and they're more likely to sustain severe physical injury than the young men who are reporting. It doesn't mean that young men don't experience trauma in any way or have not been injured. I just want to make that clear as well. And then our young people who report victimization of dating violence are at risk for suicide at 8 to 9 times the rate of their peers, and then also homicide. Eating disorders as well. I know school-based health centers really struggle with eating disorders. Adolescent eating disorder treatment statewide is just sad in terms of lack of you know, places for young people to reach out. And that's, you know, it's not my area of clinical expertise, but y'all, if you're out there and you know somebody who does that really well, encourage them to open up to adolescent practice, because we're really struggling in the state for that. Okay, actually, let me back up real quick. Let me ask folks on and here in the room who are here with us, who would you think would be at greatest risk for experiencing dating violence? Who would you think? Anybody online?
All adolescents.
Hey, that's beautiful. Okay, I don't, is that
Bobby.
Bobby, good job, Bobby. Okay, so actually that's a great answer, and I wish I had like swag to give you, because that was an awesome answer. So I'm going to tell you that I realized through this experience of understanding dating violence more deeply, how many biases I had around adult that were, you know, sort of hardwired from my work in adult domestic violence. So I clearly thought the kids who saw this growing up would be the ones to perpetrate it. And yes, in fact, there is a higher risk for young people who witness intimate partner violence between parents. or from one parent to one parent, yes, they are at greater risk. Young people who use alcohol, young people who engage in sexual activity before the age of 13, and young people who are juvenile justice engaged all have unique risk factors that lead them to be vulnerable for adolescent dating violence. But you, Bobby, totally got it, because what research tells us is actually all young people are vulnerable to dating violence. And if we think about adolescent developmental tasks, we think about individuation, pulling away from our support systems. We're, at that age, very vulnerable to control, power and control. And if their friends validate that as a natural form of showing affection, or a healthy way of dating, if their friends say it's okay, they're more likely to engage in it. So I always, when I go out with young people and do, things with young, engage with young people, I always talk about the hard feelings like jealousy and fears of abandonment and things like that, and how do you handle those feelings in a way that is not abusive, because we all go through hard feelings too, and young people are not necessarily at a place where they have the skills yet to know how to deal with intense jealousy, loss, grief, fear of abandonment. So just wanted to point that out. And then nationally and in our state, and I want to be really clear about this, and this actually led to some work that I partnered with Envision New Mexico, with UNM Peds, and I'll share a little bit about that. But in our state and nationally, young African Americans are at greatest risk, extremely disproportionately at greatest risk for teen dating violence victimization. Be clear that that's not perpetration, it's victimization. So all of our young people of color in the state are disproportionately impacted by dating violence, but particularly young African Americans. So I point that out because there's something to be said about culturally relevant, culturally appropriate methods for engagement that really support young people in their identity development. So what else is part of adolescent development is identity formation, identity exploration, and that includes your cultural identity. So we collectively recently had an opportunity to write a curriculum that is a 9-dialogue curriculum to empower young people to become peer educators with one another on significant adolescent health issues. It's called Super Peer. It's free to you all. And so this isn't like a pitch, right? There's no money attached to this, but it is kind of a pitch, because when you go to head to toe, I get to do a workshop, an extended workshop on this, and you will be able to access that curriculum and utilize it in whatever manner you would like out in your community. So just know that that resource is there. It was originally written specifically around substance use, to support young people to know how to work with each other on substance use. But I've expanded the modules to work on early unplanned pregnancy and dating violence. So you'll have kind of these things that you can add into the curricula depending on what your community needs and what young people want. So super excited about that. Oh my gosh, the time, look at what time it is. The time is flying. Okay. So then, knowing, well, first of all, I just want to say how proud I am of New Mexico. I really am. I feel blessed to be here and to be part of this work, but really it is the young people and communities in New Mexico, including elders who are out there getting the word out about teen dating violence, that had us going from one of the top states nationally in our rates of dating violence to one of the lowest states nationally, and we consistently remain low. It's still an issue, but we consistently remain low. And I'm really proud of that. We were also the first state nationally to recognize Teen Dating Violence Awareness Week. So every February, there's the opportunity for folks to get together in the community, young people to lead initiatives in their school or communities around healthy relationships. So there's a dating violence pledge. There's a whole toolkit of domestic or teen dating violence awareness month activities that I can share with you. So again, just keep that in the back of your mind and email me or text me if you'd like that. So this is a little bit out of sequence. I'm not sure what I did there, but I just want to let you know that these are some of the barriers that young people face. So because of their minor status, they're not eligible often unless they're parenting for a lot of resources. Disparity in access to health, particularly reproductive health and behavioral health care. So students you're working with are blessed to have that connection with school-based health centers, but unfortunately we know statewide that those resources are few and far between. You know, what I used to do when I was out in community and there was no school-based health center, I'd be like, okay, where's your public health, clinic? Where's that at? But unfortunately, those are less and less too. So what does that mean? How do young people, let me just sidestep here real quick and say, what do young people do if they don't have access to these health and reproductive health resources? Now, this is kind of controversial, and I'm going to throw it out there just because, we always need to be innovative. Well, first of all, the Love is Respect, Love is Not Abuse hotline is free, and it's staffed by young people. So those young people are trained to be, first responders and mental health first aid, aware, and also very skilled in helping people through crises, and they're phenomenal. And then there are other professionals there with them in case they get stuck. So that is free. If they call the hotline, and the resources are, I think, at the end of the PowerPoint, if they call the hotline, it doesn't show up on their any kind of bill. So if their parents are managing their cell phone, they're not going to see that. So that's one really important resource. Another really important resource is there are some online, this is kind of weird, some online or some text therapy resources now. Unfortunately, they do cost money, but sometimes the first 30 days are like cheap or free. And in that way, young people could use text therapy as an avenue. One that comes to mind is Talkspace, where they have, licensed clinicians from New Mexico who respond. So Talkspace, and then there are a few other ones, but that's not a free resource, but it is something, we can start thinking about in rural communities in our state. So back to this, another thing is, young people have all kinds of systems involved in their lives too, right? So if they don't show up to school, bad things happen, both to them and their parents. And then we've got Child Protective Services, juvenile justice, and then though this is getting just a little bit better, when we first started doing this work, more than, and we started in 2005, I think. There was zero opportunity for young people to seek shelter. Now youth serving shelters understand safety issues around dating violence a little bit more. And adult serving shelters are opening their doors more to young people who are being victimized, especially if they're parenting. And then confidentiality and consent laws. So one of the biggest questions that I got when I was the behavioral health program manager for OSA, one of the biggest questions I got was, do I have to report this to CYFD? So I'm going to tell you, as a licensed clinician, as a licensed clinical social worker, I will tell you my response. And then you all really need to kind of come up with your own readiness plan at your clinics to know how you would like to respond. I always recommend staffing teen dating violence issues with another colleague so that you have that peer review that you could document. I also always suggest that, regardless, when safety is an issue, you need to kind of mobilize the forces, right? You need to get parents engaged. But just with everything else with young people, really helping them to make that call to their parents, being there as an ally versus taking control is very important. That's one of the first steps of healing from trauma, is being able to take control of a situation where you're, feeling scared. So I would suggest those things, and safety is always first. I'm going to tell you something that's pretty controversial, which is that this is not necessarily clearly a mandated reporting issue. So I really want to be clear about this, because you really have to think through clinically your engagement with that young person and how much safety planning and therapeutic work you can do with them while keeping them engaged versus a sort of knee-jerk reaction that you'll call CYFD. So again, just as a reminder, CYFD deals with abuse and neglect within homes. Law enforcement deals with abuse and neglect from an out-of-home individual toward young people under 18, right? So if you're really looking at this, you might want to think about, is law enforcement the more appropriate entity to engage with? And then I always say, sometimes this is above my pay grade, right? So there are folks paid to figure out who should be called. And if you really have that gut, intuition or that clear risk assessment and you're like, no, I really don't feel safe in letting this young person leave, then make that call and have those people who are paid to do the assessment do that assessment, that safety assessment. So that's just kind of my guidance around that. I also have been a clinician at CYFD, so I know what I'm telling y'all. Just use your clinical judgment.
We have a comment from,
yes.
from our audience.
Uh-huh.
Bobby says, does this also apply if the teen couple has a child?
Okay, so this part means what? Does what apply? The Child Protective Service call?
I think that's when it came in.
Okay.
While you were talking about CYFD.
Oh, that's a great question.
The
Mandatory.
non-mandating reporting.
Okay, so thank you so much. So Bobby, there are so many different ways that I can interpret this question. So I want to make sure as I'm answering this that I really truly answer your question. So if you are concerned that an infant or a toddler of teen parents is witnessing violence, that is in fact part of the Child Abuse and Neglect Code, and that would be a mandatory reporting issue if you had reason to believe that child was in any way witnessing. So witnessing is, as a matter of fact, considered now child abuse and neglect, and that was a change in the Children's Code, the most recent iteration. So really important to note that, and it does have lifelong impact. If just by the nature of that couple being together and having a child doesn't necessarily either indicate a need to report or teen dating violence. But if you hear that that young child is witnessing, then yeah, you got to report it. And just like adult domestic violence, unfortunately, teen dating violence, young people during pregnancy are at greater risk for physical violence as well, and it remains one of the causes of birth defects, nationally. So intimate partner violence remains one of those known causes for birth defects. Does that answer your question, Bobby? Okay, so we'll assume that it does. And if you have any more questions about that, because I know that that's a touchy issue, and it just really depends on the culture of the community where you are in terms of, do you have a light touch when it comes to referral, or is there a expectation that every indicated potential act of abuse or neglect should be reported? It just really depends. So always pull in your peers and your supervisor. Reach out if you have questions. You can try and give me a call and we can try and talk it out too. Happy to do that as well. Okay, so another thing that is significant that young people deal with is both community and school violence. So we've had quite a lot of school violence lately, lethal, unfortunately, school violence, and there is some indication in research that that bullying behavior is related to perpetration of dating violence. So there is some correlation there. So when we do better at supporting young people with bullying behavior, it does influence the way that they interact in relationships, and and who knows about whether it prevents school violence, but one would hope. Another important thing to note here too is that young people who report with trauma histories, both young people who are perpetrating and young people being victimized, that is an individual risk factor, and as clinicians out there, working through emotional trauma is critical really for so many different things, including depression, suicide risk, but also, dating violence. Okay, this was one of the funnest things I've ever gotten to do professionally. Well, fun is probably not the word I would necessarily call it fun, but it was, I felt happy it was accomplished. And so I was able to co-lead House Memorial Study in 2009. And we really fought hard to get the full report out there because it was important for us in New Mexico to really be inclusive of all of the constituencies who participated. So because we were interested in understanding how in different communities we should address dating violence, we worked with tribes and pueblos. We worked with the Office of African American Affairs. We held both adult and youth forums to advise this full report. And I would like to thank former First Lady Richardson and also former domestic violence czar Sharon Pino for going to the mat to get us permission to publish this entire report, because when it hit the legislature, it got somehow distilled into a couple of pages. So it is there for your all's use. And it may be interesting, that's the link for you. It may be interesting for you to take a look and see what different communities recommended in preventing dating violence, particularly tribal and Puebloan communities. Okay, so, just to kind of round this out, since we're very close to the end, to kind of round this out, we did start an initiative, a teen dating violence coordinated community response, which is modeled after the Duluth adult model. However, we really looked at youth-specific partners and stakeholders and how would we convene these dialogue in community. There are guides and helpful tips and presentations and things I could do in your community if you were interested in starting something like this. So essentially the goal is to promote universal teen dating violence awareness, to really engage stakeholders in a broad array so that we have different voices at the table, including elders in the community. Okay, so some of the most powerful advocates in this work have been elders who I've worked with who have a passion in serving young people and connecting with young people. So if we think back, theoretically, right? So I'm always trying to bring in theory to what we're talking about. If we think back to adolescent development and that idea of identity formation, elders are some of the most important people for young people to be connected with so they can get the transmission of cultural and other important knowledge and traditions and feel confidently about themselves. So I'm going to skip over that because you all have that in your PowerPoint. Again, that's called the Teen Dating Violence Coordinated Community Response Model. I'm happy to support you all if you're ever curious about that. This is the executive proclamation, and I have to say current Governor Martinez has signed these annually, which is really fascinating. I don't lead that anymore, that process. Another avenue, if you're struggling with gaining access to the governor, another avenue is we've had mayors. You can take the language out of this proclamation and put it, or you can even Google sample teen dating violence proclamation because it likely has more current data, and you could cut and paste and place that into a request for a proclamation from a mayor, from tribal council, from a governor on a tribe or a pueblo. So be thoughtful about how you could kind of navigate that. And why would you need a proclamation, right? I'll tell you why. Because sometimes schools don't like folks to do this kind of stuff at school. Sometimes having that validity that comes with an elected official or someone with some authority, having that validity will open doors for folks. So that's why I really recommend that you consider doing something like that at the mayoral level or tribal council, or even at the school board. Having the school board ratify a proclamation that recognizes February as Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And then you can say, okay, administrator, here's my proclamation. Look who signed that thing. And so now can we do cool activities? So, okay, skipping over this. This is my favorite thing to talk about, and we're literally 2 minutes before we conclude. So you have received the red flag screening tool. I talked a little bit about it in the beginning. So screening.
Would you like Kevin to bring that up? So that you
yeah.
can see it
Yes.
while you talk
Real
about
quick before you do that, I just want to share universal screening is endorsed as a best practice by all these folks, okay? American Nurses Association, Academy of Pediatrics. So there's a lot of evidence about the importance of universal screening, and thanks, Kevin. Go ahead and throw that up. Okay. So if you can just expand it, I think I know it by heart, but yeah. So again, this was developed in 2010 based on an extensive literature review. And at that time, there wasn't as much about risk indicators for adolescents as there is now. So this could probably use with an update, and sometime soon I'll hopefully get to that. But so red flags, again, is a mnemonic, and it's meant to, R stands for relationship status. So you're really curious about if that young person is dating, how quickly did they begin dating, how serious did it get, how quickly, what's the age differential? So we know that if there is a significant age differential, then there could be some significant power and control issues there. E actually stands for a couple of things. Emotional abuse. And so you have some talking points or prompters or ways to get the dialogue started to address emotional abuse. There's also education sabotage. And then also economic, the one that you don't see up there, but again, economic abuse can be a component of it. So drugs or alcohol, this always becomes a hot topic too. But in adulthood and in adolescence, alcohol and drug use is not causal for intimate partner violence. So it means that because a young person or their partner uses or drinks, doesn't mean it's going to cause dating violence. What it does mean, though, is it's infinitely more lethal when there are drugs and alcohol happening because of the lack of barriers, that once you're inebriated, you're not thinking correctly. So it doesn't cause it, but we often find that it's a part of it, and we often find that it's part of lethal outcomes. So what we're looking for here is, does the boyfriend or girlfriend or partner force them to use drugs? Is their drug use escalating? Do you ever find yourself using or drinking to cope with the violence? So is it a way to mask trauma? So good questions to ask around that. And then F is friends and family. So this is what we're digging through when we think about isolation in controlling relationships. So are you allowed to have healthy relationships with your friends and family? Are you, one thing that was very significant and important in tribe and Puebloan communities, young people told us that friends and family are the biggest way that they experience abuse. From anything from being forced to do things that prohibit them from participating in ceremony to being literally almost kidnapped and not allowed to participate in things that were important for their community or their family. So this is a significant piece for tribes and pueblos. And then the L is our quick and dirty lethality assessment. And this is the part that you kind of want to commit to memory. And so the lethality assessment is really around escalation and anger. So is this anger getting worse? Is it happening in public, which means that person perpetrating doesn't care what other people think? They're just going to go for it because they feel emboldened to be violent. Arguments, are they increasing aggression? Abuse history, again, since we know that young people who witness this at home or themselves are survivors of child abuse and neglect, they're at greater risk. So we want to ask a little bit about that. Really important is our access to weapons. Like, does this young person have a gun? Do they have a knife? Do their friends? So also consider when you're screening for this stuff, what's happening, what's going on with their friendship network? Because some of this is, again, friends empower sometimes this behavior. animal cruelty, attempts or threats to harm self or others. So as I was working with that group of young women in private practice, one of the biggest things they would talk about is, well, he threatened to kill himself. So I went back, and I was scared I would be the cause of that person's death. So I keep going back. So, and then the very bottom, the G is give youth-centered resources. So, so if you scroll down to the next page, there is where you'll find, and I believe those links are all still live. Usually I hand this out like in a little laminated screen card like you get from like SAMHSA or whatever, but hopefully those links are live and you can download that. If you ever have a problem with a link, let me know and I'll get you that document, because a lot of these documents I have saved. One I just wanted to point out, and then I will be done, is that individualized safety plan is one of the coolest things I've ever seen, because it talks about, it's not just the basic stuff about like, make sure that you have a safety bag packed and you have a safe word and all this other stuff. Not just that basic stuff. It actually gets into how are you going to handle the grief of the loss of this relationship? What will you do with your time now that you're not spending your time with the person perpetrating the violence? So it really has that young person thinking about the change that they're about to engage in. So with that, I'm through with my bit of information for today, and I just want to thank everyone so much. This has been such an honor. I'll get to present in a couple weeks on trauma and healing in school environments. It's called Beyond the Band-Aid. So if I get to have you all again, I really look forward to that. And I'm here to answer a few questions before we conclude.
Yes, thank you. And I know we have gone over a little time, but we're willing to sit here. If you have some questions out there, we can take them from anyone here in the room too, and we'll just sit for a few minutes, and we usually just wait because sometimes there's that time delay. But if you have something you would like more information about, if you have a quick question, feel free to send it our way. I also want to encourage you, Kevin sent out the link for the survey. I know that some of you come on every single week. You get surveys every single week afterwards, and I just want you to know they're so important to the work we do. This is not a technically funded initiative, and having you answer survey results helps us build the case to go out into community and say why this adolescent health initiative is so important for people who work with adolescents in New Mexico. So I just upfront will thank you for taking the time to complete that survey.
Definitely.
And any questions for Anna? I am a home visitor, and this information will be useful as I go out into homes, both with adolescents and adults. Great presentation. That's from Bobby.
Bobby, thank you so much. And actually, that was my clinical work. I mentioned that I did a little small private practice, but the bulk of my clinical work was home-based. I did time-limited reunification and family preservation. And so I'm really grateful to hear that those tools are helpful to you. And I have tons more. So if you get stuck and you're curious, let me know. And definitely take a look at that red flag screening tool. I think it'll be helpful.
And also, I know some of you are school-based health center providers, and Anna's knowledge about services and SBHCs, and particularly this behavioral health angle, is broad and deep. So don't hesitate to reach out and ask her questions. I mean, for a while, she ran the behavioral health piece for the Office of School and Adolescent Health. So she really knows the landscape and is steeped in the work with adolescents. So reach out if you need it. And like I said, she will be back.
Yes.
I think it's next week.
I think so too. Yeah.
So join us again.
And then come to Head to Toe and see Super Peer. I really want you guys to learn about that. I'm so excited to hear what you think. So anyway, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, well, if that's it, everybody go make it a great day. Happy Wednesday, and we'll see you again, same time, same place next week.
Go be superheroes.
Yes.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. We'll sign off in just a moment. I'll go ahead and leave the room open in case you have questions or you wanted to make sure you get your CMEs, and let us know that you're out there. And yes, please join us next week, 8 o'clock on Wednesday. Sign up on our envisionnm.unm.edu calendar for next week, and that's also where you can go to view today's session and all of our other sessions. If you're interested or want to pass on the fact that you can get CMEs using our Moodle platform, so asynchronous there, just let Zach or I know and we'll get you hooked up with that. Thanks again, and we're signing off.